From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
Hello, and welcome to Indiana Issues, a public affairs program where we try to go beyond the headlines and sound bites and bring you Indiana's newsmakers in their entirety. Well, the election, thank you God, is over. We're all breathing a big, giant sigh of relief. You can probably see the bags and dark circles under my eyes if they didn't match my skin. So, with that, we're going to sort of recap and sort of look at the presidential race, the governor's race, U.S. Senate race, the race for Attorney General, and what does all this mean for Indiana's future. And we have our panel of political guests all in studio for the first time in a really, really long time. No one here joined by Zoom. We have Republican Jim Merritt. Jim, good to see you.
Thank you.
Libertarian Mark Rutherford.
Thank you.
And last but definitely not least, my good friend Lindsay Ships. Lindsay, good evening. Good morning. Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. You?
Doing fine. So let's go ahead and get started here. So let's start with the presidential race. Obviously, the polls had shown Kamala Harris was ahead or the race was tied. But when you broke it down, Donald Trump really pulled it off. Jim, we'll start with you.
Well, when you would see that most polls had the wrong track, right direction type of poll, the Republicans were really at a benefit of how people felt about the economy and things were going. And when you saw approval rating for President Biden and the whole, really the Democrat Party, I felt good going into election night. And I can tell you that it seems as though humor has left politics. And seeing Trump at McDonald's, regardless if you like him or not, you had to snicker a little bit. And then, too, with his vest on after the garbage truck pictorial in Wisconsin, it really kind of added a little levity to the race, and I thought added something to a very tired group of people. And when I was in church on Sunday, and it was the Sunday before the election, and the minister had said, you know, I'm tired of hearing the same 7 words. I can't wait until the election's over. And he heard it a lot from the flock, and I think we all shared that.
Mark?
Yeah, Jim, I'm glad you mentioned that about everybody saying that can't wait till this election to be over. That's one thing that I heard an awful lot from a lot of people. And I actually started hearing it a little earlier than usual. It always happens right before the week or so. But people were starting to say that in September, that they were very tired about that. It was a very difficult election from the standpoint of people had strong positions. They were upset with each other. They were upset on the internet. They were upset in person. And but what surprised me, and I started seeing this when the results started coming in, was I thought the Democrats, based on the polling, what I was hearing out there, would be closer. Maybe not win, but they'd be a lot closer. And it was actually farther apart than I expected.
Lindsay, what happened?
Same.
Okay, there we go.
See you in 4 years.
Yeah, really. No, I agree about the sentiment. Obviously, I spend a lot of my life on Twitter and other social media, so my candidates don't have to. I try to be that barrier so folks can maintain, I think, a normalcy or sanity, maybe is the right word. But you're right. It was incredibly toxic, and that wears a lot on your psyche. I think it definitely leans into, I just saw a map recently of the entire U.S. in terms of the anti-incumbency kind of trend we saw. That definitely affected the lack of blue wave this year. I hate that word, blue wave. That phrase doesn't really, that strikes fear in Democrats who are pragmatists hoping to work towards a center outcome. And that, for an Indiana Democrat, is important to maintain.
Which you bring up the blue wave. You bring up an interesting question. I'd love to get this from the panel. In 2022, we're expecting the big red wave, but the red wave turned out to be a blue wave. In 2024, we're expecting a blue wave that turned out to be the red wave. So it seems to me that regardless of what we in the political class, talking head universe think, the voters have a tendency to sort of make up their own minds. Mark, we'll start with you.
Yeah, they do that. And I do want to point out that a lot of the elections, the Republicans are winning 56, 57. That's still slightly less than 6 people or 60 people out of 100 are voting for the Republicans. So it's not, to me, the huge thing. Those little changes can change that total and make it closer. So I don't see waves. I just see basically probably any incumbency happened in 2020, and it happened again in 2024. I like that you use that phrase, any incumbency, on this.
Jim?
Well, it's not a wave, but it might be a realignment. You just don't know what the personality of Donald Trump, with the talking to the whole country, what those groups that came to the Republican Party, if they're going to be there again in 26. It seems as though that a lot of groups, from labor to blacks to you name it, have now the freedom to step out and vote for whoever they want to, rather than what is their past history. And I was at a football game the other day, and it was on Saturday, and somebody said, "What's going to happen in the election?" I said, "I think Donald Trump will probably win 300 electoral votes, and I think Braun probably will have 54 to 55 votes, percentage of the votes." And that came true just because we talk about it so much, and we see all the factors that are out there, and we also know that Donald Trump underpolls, and so it was kind of a recipe for what happened on Tuesday.
Lindsay?
Polls. Woof.
Yeah,
Man, polls.
I wouldn't want to be in the business.
No,
Some of us
there's.
still are, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. But to talk about an anti-incumbency, there's really an anti-polling sentiment right now. So many people are burned, and I appreciate that. Obviously, your pollster and I'm pretty sure all pollsters that were utilized by any Indiana campaign this year were all legitimate. I'm not calling to question the authenticity or the work or the rubric that goes behind any of the polling. However, it's got to be hard to be in that business right now where polls are just wrong. They're not that time. They are not a snapshot in time when you look at them as a trend, right? And so when each individual poll is sitting there telling you things that aren't reflected, even within a span of, even within a few points, right? You're so wildly off. You're wondering what's happening with the polling, and that is a problem on, I think, I don't want to speak for you all, but probably for everyone.
Oh, I agree.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndianaPolitics.org. We're doing sort of a post-mortem on the most recent election. Our guests are Democrat Lindsay Ships, Libertarian Mark Rutherford, and Republican Jim Merritt. Let's change gears, look at the governor's race, because that, once again, we figured that the trends always show, like Jim, as you said before, Indiana's a Republican state, even though Democrats have won before, Barack Obama, Joe Donnelly, Glenda Ritz. And for a while there, we thought Jennifer McCormick had a path to victory, but it turns out that apparently there were lots of red bricks in that path.
Well, urban legend, I think it's true, is Steve Goldsmith heard the night before he was running against Franco Bandit, the night before election eve, that he was up by 8 points and he lost. I hope he didn't pay his pollster the next day. And so, the polls are it's become very, very difficult to poll people. You don't have landlines and whatnot. But with Braun, I always thought that is rainwater going to play a role here, and he ended up not doing that. And as well as I thought McCormick would have at least 44% of the vote. She didn't. And as well as the idea of Trump coming in and being so overwhelming helped Braun, too, get across the finish line. Lots of factors out there, and we'll be talking about this election for a long time.
Lindsay, what happened with Jennifer McCormick? Did she just not catch fire?
I'm looking at the numbers, which are still being updated as we speak, just to make sure I speak correctly. It ended up being Mike Braun 54.3% to Jennifer McCormick 41.2%. And that's statewide. Rainwater 4.5%. And yeah, I do think that I can't speak for the DGA, but you had $2 million shoved into this race that didn't come since over a decade. Did you have that type of national money for the Democrats in a gubernatorial? I mean, I did the numbers the other day, actually, and I was looking at Woody Myers without a dang dollar from a national org, got 32%. Is that $2 million really worth another 9% on the on the ticket or on the returns? I don't know. I'm not sure if I would be super happy about that expenditure as a staffer over at DGA. But that being said, I think her message absolutely resonated. I think we struck out on turnout. our Marion County turnout really sucked. And it sucked in 2022, and it sucked in 2020. And we need to do better, and there needs to be a better plan.
Mark, a lot of folks thought that Don Rainwater have a lot more impact on this race than Libertarians have in past races. And he did sort of do better than Andy Horning. But sort of the 11%, sort of the double digits just weren't there. What happened?
Well, part of it is always the Libertarians on a statewide race. We're running with not as many resources. We aren't as big yet. We've got lots of people. We're strong in some areas we're a little weak in. And I think that a lot of voters were kind of caught into, well, I want my Republican candidate to win. I can't vote for Rainwater, who might have normally voted for Rainwater. Same with Democrats. I've really got to support McCormick. She may have a chance, and I really need to come through on that. I've talked to several people who voted a mix, Libertarian, Democrat, Libertarian, Republican. They are kind of sympathetic to Libertarian, like some of the candidates, but I think that hurt. I mean, the polling that I was seeing suggested we'd probably hit double digits, and it didn't happen. So, we're looking into why that was, but he did a lot better than Andy Horning, who didn't have as much of an aggressive campaign as Rainwater did.
How do you see the election results? We'll talk about this a little bit later in the program. Impact sort of the legislative agenda. Because obviously Mike Braun's got an agenda. We would say, hey, no, Mike Braun won in part because of Donald Trump sort of pulling him across the finish line. Micah Beckwith sort of pushing him across the finish line, but he's still got property taxes. He's got school reform. We've got health care we got to deal with. We have $1 billion Medicaid shortfall. If you're Eric Holcomb, you're like, hey,
Forecast error, not shortfall.
Forecast error. But at the same time, though, if I may use a Titanic analogy, I got Eric Holcomb in the lifeboat, sort of waving to like, hey guys, watch out for that iceberg up there. Anyone?
He's headed into the sunset. I don't think he's concerned.
But did he wear a blazing saddle? That's.
Oh, I think that remains to be seen. I think, well, I'll leave that to be. I'll let the Republicans talk about Eric Holcomb's legacy. But what really needs to happen on the third floor is a realistic conversation within the confines, of course, of, well, that ebb and flow, that Sturm und Drang is always going to be there between the second floor and the third floor, right? You're just always going to have that. That's never going to escape. But the uncertainty is always driven by a new governor and a new agenda and what the budget requests are going to look like. And I mean, you've got a lot of, if you think about this from 2016 standpoint, where you had a brand new second term, you had a brand new governor. 2018, think about the brand new budget you were having that year, where there was so much uncertainty about simply the inhabitant of State House 206, of the governor's office. Mm-hmm. You have that this year. It's just such uncertainty. I think there's a lot of uncertainty also from some of the state agencies that are a little, including an agency that we work very, very closely with, where there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen in terms of either appointees or leadership. And so and that's why I said earlier on the radio show, while I don't agree with them at all times, I do believe that you've got a really strong transition team with Governor-elect Braun, and I'm hopeful that they can resurrect what we know is the problem, and that's FSSA number one and, well, basic government services.
Mark, a good friend of ours just recently mentioned, before we came on air, that when Mike Braun ran for the U.S. Senate, he says, fundamentally, I'm a libertarian at heart. Do you think he's going to exercise some of those libertarian beliefs when he officially takes over?
Well, I'll give him all the benefit of the doubt because he's a new governor-elect. I hope he does do that. If he does, then I will be very happy about that and will commend him for it. But we'll see. We'll see. He did say that after I think right after he got elected as senator back in 6 years ago.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. We're going to take ourselves a quick break. We'll come back and talk about the U.S. Senate race and, of course, the Attorney General's race and what does this all mean for the state of Indiana. You're watching Indiana Issues. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our guest today, Democrat Lindsay Ships, Libertarian Mark Rutherford, Republican Jim Merritt. We're talking about the 2024 election instead of doing our post-mortem prognostication on the election results. The U.S. Senate, pretty much what we thought it would be, Jim Banks over Dr. Valerie McRae. But I want to say, if I looked at the result totals the most, Jim Banks, after Donald Trump, was the highest vote getter in the state of Indiana. Jim, was that because of Donald Trump?
Name starts with a B. I don't know. But you and I talked about this election night when we were doing WIBC commentary, that at one point he was leading in Marion County, and which was just a phenomenon. I could not believe that. But, aside from his not appearing at debate, he ran a very good campaign. He's been a very good congressman from Northeast Indiana. He was an outstanding state senator and a veteran and someone that should be honored with his Navy service. And he fits the bill. And as well as the fact that he tied himself to Donald Trump and he led the ticket. And you can't really say anything negative about it. He had a good day. He had a good day on Tuesday. Very good day.
Lindsay?
I will say that I'm checking here the senator, U.S. Senate totals are Valerie McRae 61.5% in Marion County and 36% for Jim Banks in Marion County. So at least that ended up the way it should be. But you would still think it wouldn't be a 60-30 or 60-40 race in Marion County, which is so startling to me, and then goes against to the point regarding turnout, which is a problem for Democrats in Marion County. They've known that for a while. They need to fix it. And same in Lake County, frankly. And Lake County is going to end up changing even more with the South Shore expansion. You're going to see that. Lake County is really going to end up being even more purple than I think blue anymore.
Well, they must have picked Perry Township. And Banks won Perry Township, and that's what was reporting.
Oh, there we go.
Mark, this was Andy Hornich's sort of last hurrah, at least for now.
At least for now. At least for now.
At least for now.
Yes.
It is the
in
last
public office.
hurrah for now.
Yes.
And I remember being at the debate at WFYI, public television here in Indianapolis, and Andy was, kind of sort of, for lack of a better term, he was being Andy,
Yes.
sort of, history and this philosopher
Right.
and these ancient Greeks. It's kind of like watching Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory, but at the same time, though, I was like, hey, so Andy, I asked him during the media avail, Andy, are you worried that you may be sort of, talking over the audience's heads and maybe want to just, I'm saying dumb it down, but just put it in a way that the audience understands what you're talking about, so we can appreciate, sort of the history and articles. Like, I'm not going to dumb down my message, for the audience. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, but if anybody who has followed Andy, and a lot of people really like that, and they like the way he does a message, but it's consistent. He always does it that way, and it's a very a level that some people don't understand, and I understand that. But Andy gets the word out, and he works hard. But he wasn't running for governor; he's running for U.S. Senate. We had Jim Banks in U.S. Senate, and Andy did a good job doing what we needed him to do. So we were pleased with that.
You're watching Indiana Issues. Ellen, do you want to add something real quick there?
No, go ahead.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our guest in the program, Democrat Lindsay Ships, Republican Mark Rutherford, and of course our good friend Libertarian Mark Rutherford.
You did that before.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Like you guys still haven't had my sleep yet.
A long week.
A long week.
The line is blurring.
Yeah. My dogs actually missed me. Like, you're okay, great. I can't stand those animals most
I think
days.
we're all working on 10 hours sleep this week, so I'm with you.
And our good friend Jim Merritt, Republican, the Attorney General's race. There was some question as to how close that gap would be. Would Destiny Wells have a shot at beating Todd Rokita? I know, Lindsay, you kind of sort of helped out the Wells
I did.
campaign.
Yep.
What happened?
Well, there was no national money in this race, which was super frustrating. I know there was a last-minute infusion of $25,000 from the IDP, and that came about in other ways than
Indiana Democratic Party.
Sorry, yes, forgive me.
Yeah.
But it didn't come from DAGA, Democratic Attorneys General Association, which is traditionally where you would see the national money coming into a race like this, right? You had RAGA donating to Todd, and so you would have expected to see an expenditure, or excuse me, a contribution to Destiny from DAGA. That didn't happen. which is curious for me because, and I, full disclosure, was on this race for a good while, but was not for the full duration of it. And so there might be some details that I'm missing here. But it's important to think that there are also unquantifiables that can come to a race that aren't in terms of a contribution, as you all know, like whether it be elevation of the conversation on either social or sharing, hey, Destiny's the one to win. Todd has done this and this and this, and he's been leading all of these Amici briefs, for example, that have just driven the office into an absolute political status instead of working for the people, which is what Destiny was talking about, returning the office to a technocratic office where it's simply serving Hoosiers' best interest. And so why there was no money from DAGA is still a question I have, but there was not even, like, they didn't even tweet about her. They didn't talk about her. They talked about how much Todd sucked, but they didn't talk about what a capable person they had in Destiny as a candidate. So that was curious to me too.
Jim?
If there's a Republican event, Todd Rokita will attend it. And he has been on the road show for a long, long time now as Secretary of State and member of Congress, and the base turned out for him. A lot of straight ticket voting in some regards, and he won the day.
Jim, I'm sorry, Mark, my theory, Todd Rokita and I, we have a history, full disclosure. But he's also got 4 disciplinary commission complaints that have been filed against him, and I was kind of one of them because he did something during the Fox 59 debate that I thought had crossed the line. He claims he has some First Amendment rights, so that'll be for the disciplinary commission to find out. But my theory is that I always said that Rokita would very likely win the Attorney General's race, but may not be able to serve out his term, because if you got 4 disciplinary commission complaints, it only takes 1 to get you disbarred. And I could easily see the disciplinary commission come back saying, with the Supreme Court saying, you know what, we're going to suspend his law license without automatic reinstatement, which means you cannot be Attorney General. Is that still possible?
Well, it's always possible. He's got 4 complaints against him. But the thing about the disciplinary complaints, and I find this with voters, you mention that to them and they glaze over because it's really kind of just among attorneys and judges, and it's stuff they don't hear much about, and it's like, well, it's just politics. But anytime you have that, and that's why attorneys and judges get upset when there's complaints against them, is that it could lead to bad results, even if you disagree with what the complaint is about.
And also want to say, Rokita actually responded during his victory speech, talking about how the disciplinary commission has been weaponized. I don't know what that means, but
Well, I think the Supreme Court is a very trustworthy institution, and the members of it, and somebody said this once. It might be Leader McConnell said, we can't throw dirt on the national Supreme Court every time they make a decision that doesn't make our day. And so I have a lot of trust in our justices, and they will make a decision, and we will move on.
And also, too, when we polled court approval ratings, the court's like 65%. And so, and if you look at Justice Massa, Justice Rush, and Justice Moulton, they all retained 65, 70%.
Yeah, people trust them.
So, hey, we got our polls right. Yay. All right, you're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our guests on the program today, Jim Merritt, Mark Rutherford, Lindsay Ships. Let's talk about, we've got a few minutes left here, either a prediction, who to look out for, or what do you see lawmakers tackling, or because they got property tax reform, they've got the Medicaid budget projected shortfall, you've got school issues you got to deal with, we've got health care. The list goes on and on and on. Jim, we'll start with you.
Well, I think one thing that we all need to be concerned about is the cliff, that the money from the federal government from the
COVID
pandemic ran out in September. And so those school programs that they supported so well with reading and the different issues of tutorial with our kids, I think that's something that we need to be very careful about. And it'll all come down to the budget. Lindsay knows this from her years and years in the State House. The budget will be the elephant in the middle room this year, and there will be a lot of, hopefully not infighting, but there'll be a lot of discussions on what should be funded and what should not. And the governor will play a role there because he has said that he wants to make government more efficient, and there are ways to cut that, and there will be a lot of arguments about it.
Mark?
Yeah, that's going to be a big issue, as the money is not going to be the same. And And I've seen the last few years, and a lot of the agencies, a lot of the commissions, et cetera, are getting kind of used to getting extra added, which is good to do if it's a good thing for government to do. But there may be even some cuts for some agencies and commissions, and that's not going to go over all that well because people have gotten used to that. There's just not as much money, in my opinion, as there's going to be, and it's going to be very interesting how it's worked out.
Well, you would think that the governor, I remember having a conversation with Mitch Daniels, and Mitch Daniels said, Abdul, I hate it when we have good economic times, because that means there's tons of money around. I kind of like it when we just being facetious, I like when we have bad economic times, just tell everybody, no, don't have it,
Right.
move on.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong at all. And that's why there were so many good budgets that came out of there. But you have to also remember that the bulk of the Mitch Daniels budget also had a bipartisan stamp of approval on it. And you had a Republican Senate, and you had, as Jim knows, he served in it, was a fiscal leader in there, and also a Democratic House Speaker, who I worked for, full disclosure. So, you had a check and balance there. But as Mark knows, I will rail against this all the time with every libertarian I come to a table with, and that's the supermajority is good for no one. I mean, it absolutely elongates the conversation in terms of just listening to each other talk, and it ends up being a word I won't use. But
It's like herding class. I think the word you want to use rhymes with cluster truck.
there you go. And so you wanted predictions though about
Well, either predictions or looks like we've got a couple minutes left here. Either a prediction that you're going to look out for, or two. Okay, we'll make this two-parter. A, who's your prediction, and two, who's a person to look for in the next election cycle? What new face are you kind of watching? I think I know who yours is, but go ahead.
I think Destiny Wells is going to be the new Democratic chair. I think it will actually be who is not in the next cycle, and that's Diego Morales.
Okay. I see that.
Silence.
Silence.
No, get a copy of the cheat sheet this weekend. You'll see exactly what she's talking about.
Abdul, 2025
It's not an election
is
year.
not election year,
Right.
so it's hard to predict what's actually.
Thank the maker.
Yeah. And
But
so-
you got stuff moving, like Indianapolis mayors. I'm sure you too obviously follow very closely.
Yeah,
so-
and there'll be new players on that scene, I'm sure. It's hard to predict what's going to happen because I think the legislature and the governor are going to take a lot of the air out of the room, and lots of conversations are going to be had on big-time topics. And it's hard to predict what's going to happen tomorrow, much less in 2025.
So who's your what phase possible shining star are you keeping an eye out for?
Well, I'm looking at Sue Finkham. I mean, Sue has been a great mayor for a year now, and but she's got situations that she's got to manage. It's a Carmel Republican Party that has always been used to success, and I think mayors in towns that are surrounding Indianapolis have to do a great job of managing, and I think Sue will do it.
Mark?
Well, Destiny Wells is a good example. I've been thinking about her, that she has a lot she could do. I think it was very wrong, in my opinion, that she didn't get more National Democrat support, because she was a very good candidate, in my opinion. One name that comes to mind is the state chair of the Libertarian Party, Evan McMahon. He does incredibly hard work. He's not as visible as he might be, because a lot of what he has to do is dealing with getting the party bigger and more support, et cetera. But I think that's my prediction, is he's going to continue doing what he's doing. And the party has showed growth, other than with rainwater disappointment, but that still was a pretty good showing considering the resources put into it.
All righty. Well, our guests on the program today have been our good friends, Republican Jim Merritt, Libertarian Mark Rutherford.
Yes, we got it.
Eventually. And, of course, our good friend Lindsay Ships as well. Special thanks to all our good friends over at the Edge Media Studios here in downtown Annapolis for all their great work. And thank you, folks, for listening and watching and sort of participate in the program. You know how to get a hold of me. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on, you guys know how to get a hold of me. I'm going home and going to bed now and getting some more sleep.
Read the cheat sheet on Sunday.
And read the cheat sheet on Sunday about Diego Morales. It ain't pretty. We'll put it that way. You've been watching Indiana Issues. We'll see you next time.